It's time for the Voice of Reason podcast. Here are your hosts, Sean Phillips, Andy Van Beber, and Travis Kirkendall.
Well, good evening, everybody.
And
there he is.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Voice of Reason podcast. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in front of your introduction there.
I didn't know if you were going to be back or not.
All good. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Voice of Reason podcast. My name is Sean Phillips. As always, I'm joined alongside my co-host, Mr. Andrew Van Beber. And today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Phillip. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Fantastic, buddy. We want to welcome my best friend, Phil Ward, to the podcast. Phil, say hello to all the good folks out there.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be on today.
Well, we had to exercise all the demons out of the podcast this week. We're actually doing it live, something we haven't done in over a month. But we're here now. So, but Sean, how are things going?
They're good. They're good. There's a multitude of different things going on in our neck of the woods. As you can see, as always, I've got my other co-host with me right now. The big kid is in bed. The big kid, I actually just had to wake up because she just got her ears pierced recently, and I forgot to clean them before she went to bed. So I had to hit him with the ear care cleaner real fast, and she was not all too happy to be woken up for that. But no, other than that, things are good. Always busy. Never slowing down, but nothing to complain about today.
And we also want to wish a happy belated birthday to our favorite jam, the Big Five. The Big Five.
Big Five. Too big.
You're aging right before my eyes, Sean. So it's okay that you're.
Me and my hairline both. So.
Well, as long as your bottom lip stays where it's at, we're okay. So, I'll leave that at
that. If it got any lower, it'd be in the seventh circle of hell. So here we
are. Oh my gosh!
Right alongside your mother.
Hey, well, there you go. That's all we need. So, a lot of things going on this week. Before we get into the big stuff, I mean, we have to talk about Red Nation this week. Hopefully I can bring home a victory, and I can, all the Swifties out there with us can rejoice, and Sean can get on with his life as normal.
There is no I in team. It's we. We are Red Nation. We are here to scalp the 49ers.
Oh, here we go. Here it is.
The one thing that's actually been funny, the most I've heard about anything, because I've tried to avoid the news this week, was Taylor Swift is trying to sue a college student who created a Twitter page, and it's meant for environmental awareness, but he has shared anytime her private jet takes a flight, he'll post from the mileage and the amount of fuel and carbon emissions that her private jet puts off. And now she's attempting to sue him. However, I think she's going to find that if Elon Musk could not sue the individual that did the same thing to him, but again, Taylor Swift is a different level of, I mean, she is the reason why the government is considering action against artificial intelligence. Pornography. So that has been yes, you didn't hear about any of that?
No.
Okay, so one of the big things when AI came out that people were worried about were things like deep fakes and different situations that AI could put people in.
Right.
Well, a couple weeks ago there was an individual who used an AI program, and it made not suitable for work photos of Taylor Swift and Chiefs fans, which was one of the funniest.
Oh my God.
But yes, and so because of that, there has been actual moves to regulate and restrict artificial intelligence because of the outrage that Taylor Swift and her fans had. So all these other celebrities, all these other individuals, even presidents who have had artificial intelligence make naked photos of them. It was the AI photo of Taylor getting pounded by Oscar the Grouch. Is what set it over.
No.
Yep, that's what set it over.
Oh my God, that's terrible. With Taylor Swift and Oscar the Grouch. Let's get it on. I don't have the sound effect board hooked up tonight. That would have been a great one for the Screaming Goat. Oh, that's
it was
too much.
Quite something.
All of our friends who commented on our last when we did that AI, that was one of our most popular shows, was the AI show. We got the most feedback from that and everything. But that's the other thing, before moving on too, man, thank you for everybody who has been checking in. All the TikToks, we are approaching, we're still about 300 away from our threshold where we can broadcast our trash on a TikTok live.
And I'm hoping that we get there, because once we do get to 1,000 on TikTok, I am probably going to use our TikTok channel as like my personal streaming channel. So once we can get to 1,000, we'll be able to do a lot more content. Maybe we'll probably get to watch Bryson whoop your ass in some video games some more on there. It'll be a good time.
Yes, that he does do that quite regularly. He got, for Christmas, he got a new gaming computer, and so now we can't compete. So the games we compete in are now like this thing. It's called Crazy Games, and they have first-person shooters in there, and it's just you just go in there. Oh, Bryson just texted me. He said, "Tell him I would cook you easily in any game." God, smart Alec. Yes, thank you, son.
He would.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Fry an egg on that big ass bald head of his. You do your thing.
Yes, we don't. Let's just keep on encouraging my son to do that. That's great. Anyway, so the reason why we invited Phil on, Phil, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and all that kind of good stuff.
Well, I have 3 kids. They're all teenagers. 2 are what you would consider typical, and my oldest is disabled. So I have more challenges than a lot of other parents would have. And at the same time, I work with troubled youth in Quincy. So I kind of see all ranges of stuff. I've done a lot of different jobs, so I've seen people in different areas and different times.
No, so Phil.
Actually, you might, Phil, you had mentioned that you worked with individuals with special needs. I just heard of this case, and maybe you've heard of it, and would love your input. Have you heard anything of the story of Natalia Grace? Have either of you two heard anything of the story of Natalia Grace?
Go ahead.
I don't think so.
So this happened in the early 2000s, and we could probably save this. This is a whole episode in itself. But essentially, it follows a young lady whose name is Natalia, who as a child was brought to America, was rescued from a adoption orphanage in the Ukraine that were horrendous conditions. She suffered from, I don't think it was dwarfism, but she had a growth development. It was something other than dwarfism, I do believe, where she was limited with her mobility. To make a very long story short, to get into, and I just heard this recently, so I guess they've made several big documentary series about it. But essentially, this was a 9-year-old girl whose adoptive mother was insane and convinced a judge and the community that she was not 9. She was in fact a 22-year-old.
Oh,
and it was an insane story. I just listened to a show about it, and it was one of those things that the first thing that stuck out to me is not only was this a little girl, but this was a severely handicapped little girl who it really went to show to me the problem with the legal system in the United States, where a judge can just based on their own merit change someone's age, which was crazy to me. And then on top of that, when it came time for the mother and her ex-husband to get in trouble for abandonment of a child, the second judge would not let the jury deliberate on the fact that she was 9. When the court case came, the reason why those parents never faced any charges was because the jury had to look at this 9-year-old as if she was actually 22. So they ruled it can't be abandonment because she's an adult.
She's of age.
And she was 9 years old. So
that's messed up. That is messed
it just really showed how messed up the legal system is, but it also really showed how when it comes to not all adoption processes, but especially like the foster care system, how dangerous some of those situations can be for children and children that have special needs.
And that is kind of leading into what we're going to be talking about tonight. The thing that's been in, we're talking about parenting. Title tonight's show is called "How Responsible Should Parents Be?" And I wanted to have one other. I'm a fresh newbie teenage parent, but if you haven't heard about the Jennifer Crumbley trial, and if you don't know who Jennifer Crumbley is, her son, and we covered this 2 years ago after it happened. Ethan Crumbley, who did a school shooting in Oxford, Michigan, killed 4 people, and he was obviously he got a life sentence without the chance of parole. So Sean earlier in the week then sent me this when the verdict came out, and said, "Man, we need to talk about this whole thing about personal responsibility, parent responsibility, and everything as far as, how responsible should these parents be held?" So, looking into the case of Jennifer Crumbley, this whole case is just twisted from top to bottom. Ethan Crumbley, who was 15 years old when the crime happened, was I'd say it would be safe to say that he had some issues. He had some mental issues. He had suffered some loss. But being the typical teenager in America today is not the same as what it was 20 years ago, because you add in social media and all that other stuff. And
you want to know what else I think the fall has been?
What's that?
The collapse of Saturday morning cartoons.
Oh, heck.
I think that if content wasn't fed to them 24/7, I think if enough kids had to wait till Saturday, like the rest of us did growing up, to watch their favorite shows, they'd understand that having a little bit of patience and not running in and shooting people when your life gets a little bit rocky might teach us all a lesson.
Yeah. So after the trial, and I watched a little bit, I didn't have time to get clips of this, but Ethan said when he was allowed to address the court, and this was 2 years ago when they sentenced him, he said, "I'm taking responsibility for what I did. I did a terrible thing. Nobody likes me now. He said, but the responsibility should not be cast upon my parents. They didn't do anything wrong. This is all on me." And so what happens then is, this is it. Why this is so historic is because his parents are put on trial now for basically gross negligence, is what we're looking at. We're looking at gross negligence, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But just right off the top, I'll start with you, Phil. How much responsibility do you think parents, you're the parents of teenage children, how much responsibility do you think should be placed on them in this situation? How much responsibility would you have taken in this situation?
I would have tried everything I could to stop the situation. I think where it falters is parents don't like labels, and they want to be a friend versus a parent. So instead of getting children help that they need because they might end up with some sort of label, they'd stop. And then they want to not take any responsibility for their own actions. Because if I don't take care of my kids the way that they need to be, then they're not going to make the choices that they should. If they don't see right and wrong and are never taught it, they don't know what they're doing is wrong.
So where we come back, and this is the other thing too. And Sean, I mean, you're still a fresh parent and everything, but when one of the things that they're looking at, one of the things that they're going to talk about, and you brought up a good point there, Phil. You know, how much should parents be responsible for? And so, in the neighborhood of gross negligence, okay. So when we look at so this was, and I'm going to just read this straight from this was the instructions to the jury, and it says, so to be found guilty of gross negligence in this case, okay. Gross negligence means more than carelessness. It means willfully disregarding the results to others that might follow from an act or failure to act. In order to find the defendant was grossly negligent, you must find each of the following three things beyond a reasonable doubt. Number one, first, the defendant knew of the danger to another. That is, she knew that there was a situation that required her to take ordinary care to avoid injuring another. Second, that the defendant could have avoided injuring another by using ordinary care. Third, that the defendant failed to use ordinary care to prevent injuring another when to a reasonable person it must have been apparent that the result was likely to be serious injury. So these are the three things that we're looking at. That these were the instructions that were given to the jury. And this verdict came out 2 days ago on Tuesday. Okay. This jury was not in I think they were in deliberation. I think a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours, and they questioned the judges like, can we do an either or? Does it have to be all three things? Does it? And so basically, so here was some of the evidence that came up against this woman. This is what really kicked me in the pants. You know, first of all, these people bought their son the gun that was used in the shooting 4 days before the attack. 4 days before the attack, they buy the gun that is used in this shooting for him. And it was guys, a Sauer. It was a Sauer, Sauer. Is that right? A Sauer. I forgot what gun it was, but they bought him this gun, and and they take social media pictures with this gun, and the mother's like, my baby. She has a picture. So they show this on one of the websites. It's like she's posing with the gun, my baby, and my baby. So her and her son with the gun. Okay. This child kept a journal. Now, the contents of this journal have not been released. I've looked everywhere for the contents of this journal, and I guess for the protection of the child, but they released some of it to the jury. And the contents of this journal go back months, and he's talking about hallucinations, seeing demons, talking about voices in his head, and he's getting all this stuff going on. He goes to his parents. And basically the response that he gets from his dad is, suck it up. Suck it up. And his mom laughs at him. So then 4 days before the shooting, they go and they get him the gun. They go to a shooting range. They show him how to shoot it, show him how to do the stance and everything. And then what happens then on the day of the shooting, and this is the thing, and I'll do the setup and then we can just go from there. So just to remind people, he's called into the school office. So he's called in the school office because the math teacher, hats off to this math teacher. She did what we are taught as teachers. So she sees a picture on something that he's drawn on his math homework that says, please help me, they won't stop. And then over in the other corner is a gun. So she's thinking self-harm.
Suicide.
Yeah. So she's thinking self-harm. She's not thinking, oh my gosh, here's this, he's, because the teachers knew this kid. The teachers knew him as someone who was going, and they bring him to the office and they call the parents. The parents come in, okay? They show him what's on that, and she's like, well, we can't take him home. We got to work. And she worked for Costco. I don't know who he worked for, but she worked for Costco. I can't go to work. And of course, Costco made a statement when that came out in the trial. They said, we would have let anybody leave for family emergencies. And so, and they didn't search the bag. They didn't, and the parents said, well, we're not going to take him home. You got to send him back to class. They send him back to class. On the way down the hallway, he gets the gun out and goes to town. Okay. So then from that, so this is what the trial was about then. The gross negligence then of this mother. She saw the warning sign. And they brought up a lot of things in this trial. She was having an affair. By the way, it wasn't Tinder. It was some other thing. Find my friend or find me a friend or something like that. It was one of those dating services or whatever it was. Sean, you know about those. But I'm sorry, I couldn't pass it up. But so and she's having this affair on the side. She's not spending time at home with her kid. The kid's at home alone by himself. And court documents say that this was a regular pattern since when he was a little child. When he was a little child, left at home by himself. Parents left him home and they argued in front of him. They drank in front of him. They fought in front of him. And so, this is where I want to kind of bring you in, Phil, with the kids that you work with in your line of work. I mean, this is becoming more of a common thing, isn't it?
It kind of is. Unfortunately, this doesn't necessarily fit with some of the kids that I do work with. The fact is, the system itself being broken, I think, which is something Sean alluded to, it really is. But it also, if you're a parent and you're not fighting for what your kid needs, then you are at fault. If with my child who has her disabilities, if I'm not fighting to get her the help and what she needs and deserves, then I'm wrong. Because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to as a parent. That's a big issue. With them not coming forth too with the information of, buying the gun, going to the gun range. I think actually one article says 2 days prior to the shooting.
Right.
That's no. That should have been done. The dad telling him to suck it up. That's wrong.
And I agree with that. I mean, some of the things, and so I got into this discussion group. Janine was, and hats off to my wife who got us more into this discussion group. She's on these discussion groups on Discord a lot. And I screenshotted some of these questions because they really, and Sean, I want to get what your input would be on this. I'm trying to find the one thing, okay, so, and maybe I'll ask you, hopefully none of us have to get into this situation, but one of the things in the chat group said, school calls and shows you that math paper, and he has access to the gun and do nothing. And some people are saying, well, she should be found not guilty. But some of them are like saying, how are you not responsible? Never mind anything else. And this one person said, I can't get past that you see this on the math page. Like I said, if I'm the teacher and I see this on the math page, because we have a resource officer. We're bringing the resource officer in. We're bringing the school counselor in. And if I'm the principal, first of all, well, I'll come back to that. If I'm the parent, I should be, I mean, a normal person, I would be concerned. I mean, would you, I mean, is that something you would be, you're going to be concerned about?
Oh yeah, definitely.
120%. Like, the thing for me is, as a parent, okay, if my kid comes up to me and tells me they're having problems, first off, if they come up to me and say that they're hearing voices, like, that is the first be end all tell that, hey, there is a serious problem. And even if you don't think it's just because they're schizophrenic, I would go as so far to be like, all right, well, I'm at least going to get a rabbi and a priest in here and bless this house, because your boy is not going to be sacrificed.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
selfishly priority
Yeah.
number one would be,
Yeah.
I don't feel like being murdered by my kid. And then the next step is, I definitely don't want other people to be murdered by my kid. And it also just sounds like, again, we said it, negligence and laziness. Like, we've talked about how awesome Costco is before, so I know that for their employees, healthcare benefits are a great thing. So it's not like the family didn't have. It doesn't sound like, if they didn't have healthcare options, it almost sounds like that would have been their fault, because I do know that Costco has a very
Right.
good health benefits
Yes.
package for their employees.
Right.
And so this is just one of, it's negligence, and we'll get into it, but now this is going to really set a precedent for when parents do know if they have kids that are selling illegal drugs, or if they have kids that they know are doing something illegal, or if they know that their kid is gangbanging at 15, 16 years old already. Now it is going to set a precedent, and again, for me personally, I think we should be setting a precedent, because we've talked about it. Maybe, like, it's tough. For example, you look at individuals like Jeffrey Dahmer's parents. Was it Jeffrey Dahmer's parents' fault that Jeffrey Dahmer went on to do the things that he did? Not necessarily.
But were they in the picture?
Right. They weren't. But now you look at, let's say, if you're a parent, and a kid overdoses on fentanyl that your son sold to a kid, that kid keeps those drugs in your house. I don't know. Again, it's a double-edged sword, and we'll get into it, but I like the idea of holding people accountable. It makes me think in my head that if I knew I was going to get in trouble for some shit that my kid did, then I am going to be a better parent, staying on top, staying involved in my kid's life. And I am hoping that is what this potentially does.
And it very well could. But now, if I have stronger consequences for me, then it changes what type of discipline I do.
Well, that's going to, but see, okay, so there's the whole thing right there. So let's get into that part of it first of all there, and then we'll get into the slippery. And I do want to, I don't want to end tonight without talking about that slippery slope aspect, Sean. But that, to me, that's a key thing. Okay, where were these parents at? So when I look at this whole thing about, and one of the guys, one of the lawyers, and I was actually watching a podcast today. This guy who's it's called and I recommend this guy. It's called The Lawyer You Know. And he did a podcast on this about, he's actually a defense attorney, but he said, if I'm sitting on this jury, he said, you could talk me either way. He's like, because the thing said, okay, so let's change it. And I want your guys' take on this, Sean and Phil. He said, let's change it from it was a Sig Sauer is what it was. And so he said, let's change this from a Sig Sauer to a car, because they took him to the range. They showed him how to shoot a gun. And I kind of saw where he was coming this, but he said, let's change it to a car. So they take him to the range, they show him how to shoot the gun, they show him how to do it. He's now knowledgeable, has working knowledge of how to work the gun. Can you not say then the same thing about a car? Could you say, okay, I'm going to teach you, I'm going to put you behind the wheel, and I'm going to teach you how to drive a car, and I'm going to show you okay, should be responsible enough to know that, okay, now your kid has access to the car. He knows where the keys are at. He knows how to turn it on. He knows how to take it down to the courtyard of the school and run over 5 kids. You know, I still think the responsibility, and back to what you said earlier, Sean, about saying, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that you know everything there is to know about using this responsibly. If it's a car, okay, and to us this sounds silly, but for some people, when you say, okay, we don't take our car and drive down the sidewalk and hit people. This isn't an episode of Fast and the Furious here. This is how we do it. This is what we're going to do. And this is what we're not going to do. Did they take that kind of care in this case? No. They didn't take that kind of care in this case. So you could say, is there negligence? Is there, you're there now. I'll go back to the car thing. You're there now. Okay, your daughter has got her permit now. God forbid. My daughter's going to have her permit in 2 years. God, that scares the holy living crap out of me. But my daughter's going to have her permit in 2 years, and we're going to just start out by just driving around the block. So we're going to say, okay, this is what we do. This is how we steer. This is how we do it. I'm going to say, you're not using these keys. You only get in this car. And I'm going to make that point perfectly clear. Now, if I was afraid that my daughter was going to do something harmful with a car, I'm hiding the keys. Okay? I'm going to keep one, in a hidden place. I'm going to have okay, and you could say the same thing for the gun. When they say, well, the gun was stored in one place and it was in a lockbox. By the way, the combination, when the police found the lockbox, the combination 000. There's your combination right there. Way to go, mom and dad. Way to be on top of that situation. So 000. So failure number 1 right there. Okay. Yeah, you teach your kid how to use it, but now he's on, and that was the other thing at school. He was on his phone looking where he could buy ammo. And when they found the gun case, they found the ammo right next to it. Box of 100 shells right there. So somewhere along the line, to try to tell me that this kid is not, that the parents aren't, that there's a lot of gross negligence. I rambled here. What do you think, Sean?
Well, 2 things that I noticed. It makes sense that he only killed 4 people after he said he was using a Sig Sauer, because that's what the Army switched to, and those are some of the shittiest pistols I've ever shot with in my life. Regardless, so one of the interesting things, at least I found it interesting, is because you mentioned it with the car, right? So yeah. I worked in the service industry, the bar industry, for a long time. I worked as a bartender for well over 5-6 years. So a big thing about being a bartender that bartenders know is that you can be held responsible for if someone gets drunk at your bar and gets into a drunk driving accident. You as a bartender can be held responsible. Even if hypothetically, let's say that individual is with someone and they go, hey, no, I got a ride, or no, I'm going to get an Uber. They walk out, they go get into a car. You have no idea. You can't follow them out there. But you can be held responsible if they get into an accident. And so if we can have bartenders be held responsible for, something that another adult is making a decision that, hey, I am going to drive this vehicle after I know that I'm intoxicated, because, I would probably say 9 times out of 10, most people that are drunk know they're drunk.
Yeah.
But so when it comes to the parental responsibility, I like what Philip said, because there are those cases where it's like we don't know, and this is a different topic, but how many parents might know that their kid is suicidal? They might not know at all until they find out that their kid committed suicide. So in some instances, the same thing can be said for kids that go on shooting sprees, or kids that go on to hurt individuals. And I like the idea of this is a very clear-cut example of gross negligence. This is not a family that, let's say, hypothetically had a family, let's say a family rifle that was locked away that the kids stole, that went out of their way to do things without the parents knowing. This is a kid that it's proven was approached his parents saying, I'm having issues, I am hearing things, I am seeing things, and I am scared. And they told him, sucks to suck, grow up. And then the same thing of the mom, shame on her for going, no, I can't take off work. When odds are she probably, didn't have to work. She was probably going to get piped down by the old, milkman down the street.
Yeah,
but
Costco employee there. Yeah.
Well, Costco does have those hot dogs for $1.25, and let me tell you, it makes sense.
Come on.
But no, the other thing is, I also hope that there is some accountability, and I'm sure there will be, and some action taken towards the principal of the school. Because I don't know about you, but I feel like the principals that I've had in my lifetime would have done a very good job of, hey, before you go back to class, I need to look through your backpack.
Right.
Or did they even ask? Because here's the thing, like, believe it or not, there's a lot of really, really, really stupid school shooters out there. Like, a lot of them are very stupid. And it wouldn't actually surprise me if, let's say, the principal had asked the kid, hey, do you have a gun in your backpack? Did you bring a gun to school? There's a very good chance that kid just would have said, yeah.
Do you think so, though? Do you think that he would have said
yeah? 100. I would say it is an actual toss of the coin based off of some of the levels of that we have seen from, like, levels of intelligence of some of these individuals that have been active shooters in the past. I'm not going to name names. I'm not. But I know an individual that went to the school that I went to, that if you told that person to do something, they were going to do it. Like, if you said, hey, go tip that trash can over, they would have done it. But anytime they did said thing, if our principal at the time, Larry Logman, would have been, who told you to do that? Because he knew that this student wasn't just doing it to do it. He'd go, that person right there. And honestly, of all my years, that individual was one of two people that I actually, like, worried about them going to school, potentially shooting the thing up. So I do think that there would have been a chance that had someone said, hey, did you bring a gun to school, that student at this point, based off of them already admitting, hey, I'm hearing things in my head, hey, I'm having issues. Because here's the thing, if you think about it, in this case of the kid going to the principal saying, hey, this is my problem, then his parents showing up, his parents saying, we're not fucking dealing with it, go to class. I think that was his decision to shoot the school was a spur of the moment because it happened on his way back to class. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like in this situation, I don't want to make him be the victim at all, because he's not a victim, but there was, at least in his own sense, maybe a plea for, like, hey, I'm having these issues. Hey, I'm writing it. I'm saying these crazy things. I'm going to the principal. I'm telling the principal I'm having issues. My parents come, hey, your kid's saying that, he's hearing voices, and they're like, well, fuck him. And they go on about their way. If I'm that kid, like, well, you heard my parents, and that's how it's, and that's kind of how it unfolds.
So, okay, so two things with that, and then I'm going to get your take on this, Phil. Two things on that. So, number one, as a school employee, I know the situation in which I work in now. I know exactly how it would be handled. I know exactly how how we're trained to handle something like that. I think for the point that kid got to go back to class should have never happened. Like you said, my old boss, Sean, your old principal, Larry Loggeman, would have said, pack them up, kid, you're walking. Our current principal would say that too. Dean Street would say the same thing. Pack them up, you're walking, you're out of here. I don't care if we have to, you know, our resource officer would take him to their office and say, okay, if he's not going home, he's going to sit with me in the resource office for the rest of the day. And I'm going to sit there with him. Okay? So now you have to look at relative rights here. You have to look at relative rights. The rights of this kid to get an education versus the safety of everybody else. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on this, Phil?
I mean, it's pointed out that this kid was screaming for help. And I would agree with Sean, that everything was wrote there. And I think his parents dismissing him this final time really set it in stone that he was probably going to do something stupid. And because he said, my mom and dad don't care and they're not getting me help. So, it's kind of sealed his fate, I think. Had the principal acted different and said, hey, no, we're going to take him out. We're going to ask if he's got stuff, separated him. Schools want to step in now for other options, for helping kids.
So what would you want? So what would you want your school to do in that situation?
For my school,
where your kids go to school?
Well, we actually had somebody come up to the school said they had a bulletproof vest on and a gun in the car. They called the sheriffs in, took him to the office, kept him there, and searched everything. We didn't know about it till it was said on Facebook. So, they did what I would expect them to do. I know they talked about arming teachers at one point. Not everybody's
right and
good with that idea.
Right, and that's what makes me nervous. That's what makes me nervous in that sense. And Sean, so now I want to get into this slippery slope thing that you're talking about, and Phil did a great segue into that. And okay, so now where does the accountability? How far are we going to take this? You mentioned and I've seen this in many places too on social media. So now are we going to hold gangbanger? Are we going to hold these these teens, these preteen gangbangers in Detroit? Or in St. Louis or wherever? Are we going to hold their parents accountable for let your kid wander out? Do you think there's going to be a line in the sand somewhere where we got to say, okay, the accountability ends here? Or, I mean, because as a school official, I kind of see and I kind of don't see where these guys, because I think in Michigan, I don't know how the law works there, but they had their hands tied. I think they had their hands tied because, okay, mom's there. She's saying, I don't see a problem. And both of you guys have said this. I think that was his last cry for help. He's got mom there. He's got the student. He's got the staff there. Mom says he's fine. Send him back to class. Okay. So who's negligent? Is the school going to? Do you think, Sean? Do you think the school's negligent in that situation then by sending him back to class?
100%, 100% negligent. Yeah. No. That I'm sorry, but if you have a kid that is drawing pictures saying that he's hearing voices, drawing guns, because I 100% think that in that instance they should have searched his backpack. They should have asked him, is this you? There needs to be questions. There needs to be follow up. For example, if you're a police officer and there's a situation, you walk in on a domestic, and people want to stay quiet because let's say it might be, some girl that was getting beat up by her boyfriend, and in her head she might think it's only going to get worse if he gets in trouble, so she'll defend him. She'll say like, oh, like he wasn't really hitting me, we were just fighting. Police are there to get this information out of individuals, and sometimes they don't do it well, and in those cases they should pay for it. Like if you guys remember the instance where there was that girl Gabby Petito that was murdered by
Yep.
her boyfriend,
Yep.
and the police, like her parents were pressing charges on the police officers that
'Cause
didn't
then-
separate them when they came up on them, and she's crying after there had clearly been a physical altercation between the two of them, and they just let her go with him, and
Yeah.
2 hours later he murdered her.
He murdered
So
her.
this
yeah.
is a very similar situation where this student killed 4 other students after saying, I'm hearing voices, I'm having these issues, and then shame on the parents, but also shame on the school for saying, okay, well, you're gonna stay here, or again, school resource officer, or someone needs to be with the student. And again, the fact that they didn't ask him if he had a weapon,
Yeah. And
is crazy to me.
And so, but that's the other point for me. Okay. This is where I kind of disagree with you, just a slight bit. Okay. Mom's there. If she is so out of touch that in her head, she looks at this picture and she sees the gun and she sees the help me, somewhere in her brain should have triggered somewhere, oh dear God, the gun at home. Something new that we've introduced to ourselves in the last 4 days. We've introduced to ourselves. We've introduced to our family. At that point, she should have said, I think you need to search my son's bag. But in the whole thing of just saying, okay, well, we're going to pass the buck. Let's pass the buck, and let's say we're going to put it on this. I'll let the school take care. And this is the problem that I have, and this is the disagree part. The disagree part is the teacher in me, because at some point, parents have to start being parents and raise their kids. Raise your dang kids, because we do see them. We see during the school year, we see your kids more than you do. What your kids get on the bus, 7:30, something like that, 7:30 when they get on the bus. And so yeah, so they get on the bus 7:30, they get home 3:30,
2:45.
Okay. So then you've got 2:45 up until they go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. So, it can be it's almost an even split. But if you have your kids in after school activity and everything else.
Well, and if parents are working.
And if
parents work
exactly.
till 5 o'clock.
Yeah, and there's some nights that Phil works a swing shift. Sometimes he works nights and he'll work days. So there's those times that you have. And again, here's the problem right here. Here's your babysitter. Here's your babysitter right here. Go put them on the phone. Go be involved in your kid's life. This woman obviously, and that's one of the things that they brought up in this trial, was this woman was not involved in her son's life at all. From a young age, they're abandoning him and leaving him at home. Okay? Now, we can shoulda, woulda, coulda all the way around with the school. Like we said, I think the school, to a point, I've been in education. This is my 26th year. I know how I've been. The 4 principals I have had, have all been hard-nosed principals. The no BS principals who say, here's how it's going to be. And they bring them in, and they have the foresight to see, I can see this going and becoming a bad situation. I'm going to keep this kid out of the classroom. He's a danger to everybody else, and he's a danger And so that's the part of me that agrees with you. That's why I say agree and disagree on this. That's the part of me that agrees with you on this. Those guys, who knows what that situation, what that environment, what size that school is, how litigious are the parents in that part of the state that say, you're not going to search my kid. But by the way, Supreme Court case, there's a multiple Supreme Court cases that say anything that's on the school property, the school has the right to search. Even if the parent, attorney, whoever's right there, if that bag's sitting in my office, I have the right to go through it. So that is on the school. But at the same time, I'm mad about the fact that the warning light didn't go off in mom's head. The warning light did not go off in mom's head. Now the dad's trial is coming up in March, so it'll be interesting to see if they bring anything else out. So I guess the next thing that I'm going to, and we can end on this point is, and I know Phil, you have an opinion, Second Amendment rights and stuff too. One of the articles, and I want to bring this out, one of the articles that I read, if I can get my Chromebook, if I can get this to come up, it was the Oakland County attorney who was in this case. What they're afraid of now then is, okay, is this going to open up lawsuits against gun manufacturers? Is this, because again, this is where I'm concerned at how far are we going to push this accountability button? Yes, I believe that we should say, okay, parents are accountable. I mean, as a gun right person, I mean, is this something that you're going to be, are you concerned with this, Phil? Is this something that you would be concerned with?
A little bit, but again, you're putting accountability on an inanimate object. I have probably 7 guns in my house. They have never got up, walked, and done anything without me behind it. So every time there's a shooting, we go after the inanimate object instead of what happened to that person to cause them to do it. Andy, I could set a gun between the two of us. It's not going to do anything. It's going to sit there. And it's just going to be a paperweight.
Well, this is actually, I misquoted this. So I want to read this quote. So the county sheriff, it wasn't the district attorney, it was the county sheriff who who investigated the parents, said that the jury plowed new ground with this verdict. A national advocacy group called Every Town for Gun Safety that works on policy to reduce gun violence said that the verdict shows that the Oxford shooting could have been prevented, especially with proper gun storages. Okay? The charges in this case were remarkable. The number of signs missed and decisions made were too hard just to ignore. Okay? Who is the senior vice president of this group? Sean, what are your thoughts on this?
No, I mean it's an interesting topic. It's not one that I would have thought with this particular case, but you're right. I mean, I love our ability the right to bear arms. Trust me, I have said it a million times on this show. I am not a fan of big government. I am not. I never will be. The big thing for me with weapons are in my opinion, if you are a law-abiding citizen who knows how to handle weapons and who knows, the proper use of weapons and what they're for, then absolutely you should be able to get your hands on them. However, for me, it is still crazy because, again, this is just speaking from experience. I have walked into a gun store. I have left a gun store in 10 minutes with a brand new gun. That is insanity to me.
Yeah.
It's crazy. There are even faster ways. Heck, you can go to a gun show. There's a gun show here in Kansas City that it even faster. The vetting process needs to be better. This is one of those cases where,
they could have looked at the parents.
Again, this is a tough one because if the parents are two law-abiding citizens and they're going to buy the weapon for them, then there's nothing. There's, like, what do? Do you deny them the right to buy a pistol, and then it turns out they had a crazy son that was going to kill people 4 days later?
Well,
Um,
so there's where the gross negligence comes back in, okay? And like you said, so the gross negligence then gets pushed away from the gun manufacturer and back to the parents. Okay, you need to take responsibility for your kid. Okay, you're buying this gun. You're buying this gun for you. Okay, and that was another detail. I was actually curious about that one fact that you just said. Did these guys have to go through a waiting process? Did these guys have to go through, you know? And from what I've
no,
what I've read,
and
these people they didn't have any they didn't have any priors.
well, look at
So
it. Look at it this way. Here's the thing that gets me, and it's some might say, it's like calling an apple an orange. But here's the deal: what do you have to get in order to drive a vehicle legally without getting ticketed, without potentially go to prison? You have to get your license. You have to have your vehicle licensed. You have to have your vehicle insured. Those are all things that you have to do to ensure that you can be on the road correctly. You have to get inspections for your car. However, you don't need a license to purchase a gun. You don't need insurance to purchase a gun. You don't need to get your weapon registered.
go ahead. What were you going to say, Phil?
Sean, the license depends on states. Like Illinois, you have to have a FOID card in order to even touch a gun.
Right.
And then it's a 72-hour waiting period in order to have anything. But they know who has them, and if you read the law, if there's a gun in the house, everyone in that house has to have a FOID card. So it's just state specific.
And isn't it Illinois is the third highest in gun crimes in the United States?
Depends on where you look. I mean, yeah, Chicago. Doesn't mean you're going to buy them legally.
Yeah, and again, that's the other thing about it. No matter how much you punch up the gun laws, it's not going to, one other
No,
point
exactly. That's the
Right.
problem with it is, in theory, there's all these
right.
things that we should do, but like you just said, Illinois, there's a vetting process, and yet
It doesn't. Yeah.
and yet here we go, the one of the largest states for gun crime laws in the United States.
One other light note that I want to bring up on this. By the way, this Crumbley's defense attorney. I invite you to read how this woman conducted herself. Crumbley's defense attorney was a moron. In her closing argument, this was and we talked about old Swifty earlier, Sean. She actually quoted in the opening argument, she said, "You can't patch bullet holes with Band-Aids." I'm like, what? What?
She hire Amber Heard's attorney? Good Lord.
I know, exactly. And then, so I'm going to read this directly because this is too much. In her closing argument, the attorney took the unusual tack of referring to her own family to try to deflect an unflattering portrayal of Jennifer Crumbley. This is what the attorney said. "It does not mean that she loved her son any less if she ever told a witness, 'My son is weird,'" Smith said. "I have sent texts to my husband saying, 'Our daughter is a psycho today. On the way to school last week, she's crying she doesn't have people to sit with at lunch. I texted him, she's a nutcase.'" Wow. Good job. That's your defense attorney. That's what you're paying.
Damn. Just imagine that girl's going to go to school and someone's going to walk up to her like, you cry like a bitch and your mom's an idiot.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh my goodness. Well, this is something I'm glad that Sean doesn't have to talk me hard into anything. Let me rephrase that. Let me back up. There are certain things that Sean would have to talk me hard into doing, but this is not one of them. There we go. I wanted to clear that up before you took it the wrong way, and we had our sexual innuendo for the week, but we'll let that one go. But yeah. So we want to thank Phil Ward. Phil, thanks for being with us tonight. We really appreciated having you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Phil.
You're welcome, guys. This was fun to do.
Yeah. And we, for those of you who don't know, we, if you've been a follower of the podcast, and I forgot to mention this, Phil's wife was on an episode. It might have been last summer. I think it was last summer that she was on an episode. So thank you, Phil. There's a reason why he's my best. He and, I only have my closest friends on Phil. And of course, if we can ever get Matt to come back on, that would be great too. But yeah, that was great. Sean, anything else you want to say before you take us out?
I do not. There's a lot of good things coming down the pipe that we'll talk about later this week. Possibly the Tucker Carlson Putin interview, what's happening in the WWE. There's all kinds of good stuff also, that we can kind of circle back to.
Don't forget that today that Joe Biden addressed when he talked to the French president who's been dead for 30 years.
Oh, that's another thing we can talk about. How
yes, that
an investigation on the president showed that when he was vice president, he had no memory. So that would be that was good to find out.
Yes.
But no, again, to everyone that listens, be a friend, tell a friend. We are so close. Like we said, we are 300 subscribers or followers away from our goal of 1,000 on TikTok. So please, if you are seeing a clip from that, or if you do have TikTok and you don't follow us yet, please go ahead and do so. Be a friend, tell a friend. You know where to find us, where you listen to your podcast. We're glad that you spend an hour with us each week, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Voice of Reason podcast. Be sure to check out our other content on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok.